choosing the top ERP systems for 2025, how AI and RPA are optimizing hospital pain points, and how to go through a business transformation without technology. Those are just a few of the topics we're going to cover here in episode 182 of Transformation Ground Control.
Welcome to Transformation Ground Control. Ground Control. The podcast that covers everything related to digital transformation. This podcast features technology agnostic and international discussions related to digital strategy, software selection, implementation, change management, business process optimization, and everything else you need to know to make your digital transformation project successful. Whether you're embarking on an ERP implementation, supply chain transformation, or any other business or digital transformation, this podcast is for you. Now, here's your host, Eric Kimberling.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Hello, welcome to episode number 182 of Transformation Ground Control. This is the weekly podcast that covers everything related to digital transformation, including the people, process, technology, and strategy sides of transformation. This is also the technology agnostic view of the market, independent, tech agnostic, and unbiased. My name is Eric Kimberling. I'm the CEO of Third Stage Consulting. We're an independent consulting firm that helps clients throughout the world with their digital transformation journeys. And joining me, as always, is Darian Chwialkowski. Darian, thanks for being here today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Excited for today's show. We've got a lot of good stuff, action-packed episode here. As always, we're going to open up with some audience questions from social media. We're going to get into some newsworthy topics to open up the segment. We're going to talk about how AI and RPA are being used to ease hospital pain points. And we're also going to talk about the changing role of data scientists in the age of AI. And then later in the show, we're going to get into an audience-driven discussion around how to choose the top ERP systems for 2025. And we're going to talk about some of the leading systems that you might be considering as you enter into 2025, as you think about your ERP initiatives in the coming year. And then last but not least, we're going to talk about how organizations can go through business transformations without necessarily needing to invest heavily in technology. And want to invest heavily in. And then we'll also talk about, if you don't want to invest heavily in any new technologies, what might that business transformation look like? So all that being said, what do you have in store for us in terms of audience questions on social media, Darian?
Yeah, so our first audience question today kind of talks about the difference between ERP implementation and digital transformation. On LinkedIn, Eric, you posted about this difference here on a chart. And this question is, as mentioned in the chart, ERP implementation and digital transformation are not identical. ERP focuses on streamlining existing business processes, whereas digital transformation revolutionizes business models and introduces new ones, leading to disruptive innovation, which is okay. But after digital transformation, the next step is innovation or disruption, which included the change/creation of new business models. The chart here shows, I think, the difference between traditional or modern expectation from ERP implementation, which in modern term is called digital transformation. Correct me if I have wrongly understood the concepts.
Yeah, I think that's a great observation, a great summary of the difference between digital transformation and ERP implementation. And in the graphic he's referring to, or that this person is referring to, is comparing more of an incremental ERP upgrade to more of a transformative, true digital transformation, rethinking the business model, more of a quantum leap in a change to your business versus the more incremental approach. And I think the key, rather than getting hung up on, even though the slide in the graphic that this person is referring to does draw a clean line between ERP implementation, digital transformation, the reality is those are just words. It doesn't matter what you call it. It doesn't matter if you call it an ERP implementation or a digital transformation or both, or you call it something different. What really matters is just making sure you get focused and aligned and that you're all clear as a team, as an organization, on what it is you're trying to accomplish. Because what ends up happening a lot of times is organizations will, at the leadership level, at the executive level, will expect that this digital transformation is going to totally transform the business. It's going to give them a whole new way of operating, a new business model, et cetera, et cetera. All good stuff. But then when they go to execute the project, they treat it like an ERP, like a more of a simple technology upgrade. They invest less money in it. They invest less time. They expect it just to happen overnight. They don't apply the resources that they need to be truly transformative. And so you get this misalignment from the start between expectations and the way you actually run the project, and suddenly team's not on the same page. Suddenly everyone's stressed out and unhappy because you're not accomplishing what you said you were going to accomplish, because you're not treating it the way you said you would. So, that's the way to really think about it, is taking a more incremental approach is okay. I mean, that's not the end of the world. Some organizations are risk adverse. Some organizations don't have the budget. Some organizations don't have the time or the resources to go through a big, huge transformation, and that's okay. Just be aware of that, be deliberate, and be aligned on what it is you're trying to accomplish. And I think that alone doesn't guarantee success, but it sort of greases the wheels for your transformation or for your project to ensure that you're all heading in the same direction, you have the same expectations, and you're all trying to accomplish the same thing along the way. So I think it's a great point, but I also, even though I'm the one that maybe started the conversation around words and what exact phrase you use, whether it's ERP implementation or digital transformation, that's not nearly as important as what this person points out, which is just being very clear and deliberate about what it is you're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, for sure. So understanding just what you're trying to accomplish as a company more than the exact definitions and terms that you're using is probably more important.
Yeah, absolutely.
So our second social question today is, after about 300 ERP implementations, my experience is the single biggest cost overrun to any implementation is delay. Ultimately, nothing will have as much impact on the cost of your implementation as the time between the projected go live date and the actual go live date. Eric, do you agree with this? Is that the main thing that can add or blow your budget in an implementation, or is there other factors as well?
There are other factors as well, but I would say the main cause of cost overruns is not having a realistic time frame. And if you think about, I'll give you an example just to like a hypothetical example to show how this typically unfolds. Let's just say you choose an ERP, you choose a software vendor, and you choose their product. Either the vendor, the system integrator, or the implementer comes to you with a proposal and says, okay, the software is going to cost this much money over here. And we'll set that aside for a second, because it's usually not the cost of the software that causes the overruns. It's usually the cost of the implementation. So let's assume the cost is what it is. It's realistic. It's accurate. We're comfortable with it. So set that aside. The other part of the proposal says, okay, we're going to implement this product in 18 months. And in order to implement in 18 months, we're going to staff the project with a certain number of people. And let's just, for simplicity's sake, just for ease of math, say it's $1 million a month is what it's going to cost. So $18 million in 18 months, we'll implement this product for you. So you run at a rate of, and I'm simplifying this example. It's not always this way, but typically if you say it's 18 months, $18 million, you're averaging $1 million run rate per month. That's how much you're spending on the implementation. But the question then becomes, well, what if that 18 months was never realistic? What if it was always going to be 24 months or 30 months or 36 months? What ends up happening is, let's just say it extends to 24 months. Well, you're still running at $1 million a month, and now you're going to spend 24 million instead of 18 million. And again, simplifying, it's not always that cut and dry, but in general, that run rate continues for the extended duration. And now all of a sudden your cost is escalated. If you would have just known it was going to take 24 months all along, you might have staffed that project differently to where maybe you're running at a $700,000 or $800,000 a month rate. You're spending less per month, but you're spending the same amount of money overall. But the problem is, if you didn't have a realistic expectation, vendor sold you on something different, you've already consumed and spent all that money, and you're going to continue to consume and spend more money until you hit the end of the project. And so that's the dynamic that often comes into play. And that's why it's so important to be realistic. I mean, if it's not going to be 18 months, then don't commit to an 18-month time frame. In fact, I would argue push it out more. If you think it's going to be 24 months, try a 30-month duration. You can always pull it in. It's a lot easier in some ways to pull in the timeline and say, okay, we're actually going to compress this now because we're moving along faster than we thought. But the key is, if you did assume, say, a 30-month run rate or a 30-month duration, you're not going to be running at $1 million every month. You're probably going to be more like $500,000 or whatever it is. So that's the way you've got to manage this. And then, of course, there's still project governance controls you have to have in place. You have to manage your system integrator, manage the outside consultants, because that's where the real money can add up. So there's other things that can factor into cost overruns as well. But what this person brings up, I'd say probably is the number one cause of overrun, is the fact that you never had a realistic duration to begin with. Therefore, you started spending heavily up front as though you were going to complete it in an unrealistic time frame, but you were never going to complete it in that time frame. So it ends up costing you a lot more.
Yeah, for sure. That makes sense. Some great social questions today for this episode and lately that people have been leaving all over our socials. So if you guys have any other questions, you be sure to leave them on our socials and we'll be sure to grab them and answer them on any of our podcasts here. But I'm really excited to get into our newsworthy topics later on in this episode.
Yeah, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to get to AI and RPA being used by med equipment companies to help ease hospital pain points. And we're also going to talk about the changing role of data scientists in the age of AI. And then later in the show, after we get through these newsworthy topics, we're also going to talk about some of the top ERP systems you should be considering for 2025. We're going to take audience input and feedback to talk about the pros and cons, the good, the bad, the ugly of different ERP vendors out there in the marketplace, and hopefully give you some good tips on how to compare different systems in the marketplace, what some of the leading comparisons are between these different systems. And then last but not least, later in the show, we'll get into how to engage in a business transformation without necessarily investing heavily in technology. So stick around. We're going to get to all this and more. But first, we're going to take a quick break. We'll be back with more Transformation Ground Control.
If you are involved in any sort of digital transformation or business change initiative, you'll want to download the Digital Transformation Report. With its comprehensive overview of business and technology trends and best practices, this report is a must-have guide for any transformation project or executive team. Download this free report by visiting Third Stage Consulting at thirdstage-consulting.com. You can also visit our website to learn more about us or download independent reports, videos, and other best practices. Again, visit thirdstage-consulting.com today to learn how you can take your transformation to the third stage of success.
Are you looking for ways to promote your product or service to enterprise technology decision makers and influencers throughout the world, like the ones who listen to this podcast? Major Tom Productions creates media, events, and influencer marketing for B2B technology providers. Our productions are exciting, educational, disruptive, and effective. Most importantly, they create results. Our content is unlike any other in this industry, engaging, influential, and trusted by technology buyers and influencers throughout the world. Each month, our productions reach hundreds of thousands of targeted buyers and decision makers who trust and engage with our honest and tech-agnostic content. With long-tail viral results and engagement with our content, Major Tom Productions provides a way to reach your target market and create awareness, calls to action, and a connection with potential customers. So collaborate with us today. Learn how we can feature your product or service on podcasts such as Transformation Ground Control, Journey to S4HANA, and Journey to Dynamics 365. We can also feature your brand on our YouTube channel called Digital Transformation with Eric Kimberling, which boasts over 100,000 subscribers and over 2 million video views per year. You can also participate in our in-person events, including our Digital Stratosphere Conference. Contact us today to learn more. We can tailor a marketing campaign that works for you. We look forward to helping more people learn more about and become engaged with your brand.
Hello, welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 182. My name is Eric Kimberling here with Darian Chwialkowski. You can find new episodes of this show every Wednesday by going to transformationgroundcontrol.com, and you can also watch past episodes at transformationgroundcontrol.com as well. And be sure to check out our upcoming event, Stratosphere 2024 as well. It's Digital Stratosphere. It's a tech agnostic conference that we are hosting in early October in Denver, Colorado. You can join in person in Denver, Colorado, or if you can't join us in person, you can also join remotely. You can buy a virtual pass. So be sure to go check out the agenda, the speaker lineup, the entertainment, all the stuff we're going to cover at that conference. Go to stratosphere2024.com. So, Darian, you've got a couple really interesting newsworthy topics for us today. What have you got in store for us?
Yeah, a couple of AI topics kind of in different areas, but the first one is about US med equipment eases hospital pain point with AI and RPA. This article from the CIO discusses how US MedEquip is a medical equipment rental company that utilizes artificial intelligence and robotic process automation to address operational challenges within hospitals. Specifically, the company implemented an AI and RPA solution to streamline and automate the process of managing medical equipment inventory across multiple hospital locations. Some of the key points were just increasing operational efficiency, which has to do with how equipment is dispersed across various hospitals efficiently and making sure each hospital has the correct amount of inventory and is scheduling correctly, and the distribution of the equipment as well. It also can use the AI for predictive maintenance, for maybe high uses of equipment during certain times of the year. So then they can reevaluate or predict when equipment will need to be distributed to different hospitals. And then RPA for automation was to automate routine tasks such as data entry, reporting, and compliance check, which take a lot of time for people working at the hospitals to file all these different things. So hopefully that can automate and save time for them, less paperwork essentially. This impact that it has on hospitals is the implementation of AI and RPA solutions resulted in significant benefits for the hospitals, and it enhanced its operational efficiency, reduced costs associated with equipment downtime, and ensured that medical equipment was readily available when needed. Overall, this article just showcased how technology, particularly AI and RPA, can be leveraged to address pain points, especially in the healthcare industry, and ultimately improving patient care for operational outcomes for hospitals. Eric, for this kind of topic of digital transformation and adding technology within hospitals, what do you think are some of the best case scenarios that can come out of this for hospitals, and when do you think hospitals should start making this more streamlined across all of them?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's really interesting hearing this case study of what you just mentioned as far as some of the benefits around, efficiency with use of equipment and things of that nature. But it also gets to better patient outcomes, I would imagine, by having that efficiency and that better planning and logistics and all that. I mean, ideally, you would think that would enable more of a better patient outcome. But one thing that I'm super fascinated by, I haven't seen any data to suggest this is happening yet, but I have to think it will happen at some point in the near future, is like if you could take all this data that scientists and doctors throughout the world capture every day about different patients and symptoms and outcomes and prescriptions or prescribed solutions and results and all that stuff. If you could take AI to take just mass amounts of data and look for correlations and patterns in that data, I would imagine that that's going to be, taking all these scientific research studies that have been done over decades and really fast track that and take bigger sets of data, compile it faster, eliminate some of the human error, and really look to, have better insights into healthcare in general and what causes certain ailments or what solutions we might not be thinking about at scale, but there's pockets of data that suggest that there's some sort of solution that we haven't thought about as humans. So I'm really excited about that. I feel like that could be the real game changer with AI. And that's what's cool to think about is, you think about all the fear and uncertainty around AI right now. There's also some excitement that should be there too, because there's so much cool stuff with society and that could benefit, not just in healthcare too. You think about stuff like, that people are passionate about things like climate change. People are really concerned about climate change and humans' impact on climate change. Could AI help us figure out, what exactly are we doing well and what are we not doing well to control that, and what could we be doing better? And, just using data in ways that scientists have probably struggled to capture, large amounts of data and analyze large amounts of data. So I think there's a lot you could do with it. And I think it's pretty cool to think about.
For sure. I agree. One question I kind of have from this is, with how fast technology and AI is changing, is it actually scalable for healthcare industry, for example, to implement this technology right now, and how would they be able to kind of future proof that to scale with the technology?
Yeah, good question. I think it could scale. I mean, I think the technology could definitely scale, and I think the technology is probably close to being where it could technologically scale. But I think the trickier part might be, if I were to guess, and I'm not a healthcare expert by any means, we have people on our team that are much better versed in the healthcare space than I am. But if I were to speculate, I would think that some of the issues might reside around, first of all, privacy. Privacy is a big deal in general, but especially in healthcare. I know, like in the U.S., where you and I are based, for example, there are HIPAA laws, they call them, which are basically patient privacy, and there's limitations on what you can do with that data and who you can share it with, et cetera. So privacy laws might come into factor, or might be a barrier or an obstacle to using AI, especially if you're talking about an open AI model, or open AI using open AI as one of the solutions. And I also think that where I think the big resistance or the pushback might come from the healthcare industry is just the threat that AI could undermine the perceived expertise of people in an industry that spent years and years educating themselves and becoming experts in their field. Now, all of a sudden, you're bringing AI into the mix to do something maybe better than they might be able to individually. So I think the inertia, or the resistance to change, or the perceived threat that AI might impose on doctors and other highly educated people, I think that could be another point of resistance as well. So I think it's not really answering your question about, is this technology scalable, but it's more, is the adoption of the technology scalable? And I'd say the technology itself, yes, it probably is scalable now, but the adoption of the technology, I suspect, is probably not scalable yet. I imagine there's going to be some headwinds and resistance in the industry to that technology.
For sure, that makes sense. How does the adoption of AI and RPA technologies need to be managed among healthcare staff if they are going to implement it into their hospitals? And what are some effective strategies maybe hospitals can deploy to ensure acceptance and proficiency among healthcare professionals?
Well, I think the first thing is, it's not going to be, healthcare being so highly regulated and so much at stake, right? Human lives are at stake. You can't really just go test out some AI and see what happens. I mean, it's not as, it's not as conducive to experimenting and agile approaches and stuff like that. Healthcare is probably not the right space to be doing that, sort of high stakes gamble. So I think being even more deliberate and having a clear, structured approach to how you're going to use AI, or how you're going to use RPA, and how it's going to fit into our business operations, and making sure you test it fully and it's been fully vetted, and all that stuff, becomes even more important. It's important for any organization, but especially in healthcare, especially for hospitals where there's so much at stake, both from a regulatory perspective, ethics, there's all kinds of stuff at stake there. So, that's what I would say, is that's probably the best thing you can do, is just make sure you've got a real clear, deliberate strategy, and that you're not encouraging too much of a agile, shoot from the hip approach to using AI or RPA, or any other technology for that matter.
For sure, that makes sense. To get into our next newsworthy topic, we're still going to talk about AI, but we're kind of switch gears and go into the role of data scientists developing AI and the age that AI is in right now. So this next article talks about how the role of data scientists could potentially change in the new age of AI. And the reasons they gave for this was because there is so much accessibility to AI and how user-friendly it is, really reducing the need for data scientists to create models from scratch. Also, the shift in skills. Organizations are focusing on prompt engineering over traditional data science skills, emphasizing critical thinking and communication. Also, customization techniques like fine-tuning and retrieval augmentation generation cater to specific needs requiring more programming skills than the typical data science skills. And then the last reason was the rise of data engineers. So data engineers are gaining more importance for ensuring smooth data flow in AI systems, becoming potentially more critical than data scientists in particular AI implementations. In essence, this Forbes article summarizes, while data scientists are still essential for advanced AI tasks, the increasing accessibility of AI tools and the pivotal role of data engineering are reshaping their prominence in the organizational AI strategies. Eric, with the evolving role of data scientists and the rise of AI capabilities, how should organizations approach talent acquisition and development to support their digital transformation efforts?
Well, I think, looking outside the realm of what you would normally hire for, is one thing, looking at the new skill sets you need in the future. And you talked about how, the AI role itself and the chief data officer role itself has changed so much just in a year or two. So just making sure that your hiring practices keep up with that is one aspect. And also, not forgetting that it's not just skill sets on paper. It's also, you want to find that right cultural fit and someone who can help you intangibly move the company forward and move through its transformation, which involves a lot more than just the hard skills of knowing data science and AI and all that stuff. You also have to understand the culture of your organization and your strategy and make sure that you're sort of aligning everything you do from an AI and data perspective to fit that overall strategy. So you want to find people or acquire talent that sort of fits that model, whatever that model is for you as an organization.
Right. So you mentioned making sure you find people that fit your culture of your organization, but to take kind of a step before fitting your people to your culture, how important is fostering the culture and creating the culture within your organization to fit, innovation and agility for achieving successful digital transformations? And what are some effective strategies that you've seen to cultivate this type of culture in organizations?
Yeah, good point. And I think, first of all, you have to recognize that there's two sides of it. I mean, you have the culture you have today, and you want people that fit your culture, but you also want to bring in people that help you evolve your culture and change your culture to what you want it to be in the future. So it's sort of a tricky balancing act. You can't go too far one extreme or the other, but you need to sort of, assuming you're trying to change your culture, become more data driven, become more technology driven, it's going to require you to bring in a certain skill set that sort of tests the boundaries of the current culture, but you also need someone that's somewhat grounded and understanding of your current culture. So I think that's the first thing. And now I lost track of your question. The question is around innovation, or what was the question again?
Yeah. How do you create the culture first that, fosters this innovation type of and wanting to change and go with the future type of culture in your organization before bringing people on?
Yeah, good point. So it starts with leadership and making sure that leaders have clearly articulated what kind of culture they're trying to create and how they envision innovation and technology and disruption. How do they value that, and how do they see it fitting into the organization as a whole? And rewarding people and letting people take risks and chances. I mean, that's all. You can't just say we support innovation or we support transformation. You also have to let people take risk. You have to let people make mistakes at times. You have to get input from people, because you as a leader are not going to have all the answers. So you need to, do more than just say that you support innovation and transformation. You also have to set up an environment through reward systems and processes and expectation setting and management styles. There's all these things you have to change and lead as part of that overall shift in your culture.
For sure. And going back to be more specific to the article of how data scientists' role might be shifting, how do you see this role of data scientists, data engineers, et cetera, all those different roles kind of evolving and changing as AI grows?
Well, first of all, I think it's going to become more important. The data role is just going to exponentially increase in importance, and it's going to become more of a competitive advantage for companies that truly figure out their data situation as far as data cleansing, cleanup, and access to data and integration of data. And then, of course, the use of the data through AI and analytics and reporting, things of that nature. So I think it's going to become exponentially more important. That role, I think, is, if you're in the data field right now, or if you are in university or you're looking for a career shift, you want to go back to university to switch careers, data science is one I would definitely consider, because I think that's one that's just going to be hot for decades to come. Probably. I mean, I can't imagine, in my lifetime, at least, I can't imagine a time when data is not going to be super important and increasingly important over the next few decades.
For sure. I totally agree on that. I think, I know this Forbes article talks about how it's maybe just changing, and it might change as AI gets, more mature and more expanded throughout the world. But I think overall that data is going to be one of the most important things, obviously, to then teach that AI and expand it everywhere.
Yeah.
So need those people to be able to handle the AI, obviously, and teach it.
Yeah, totally agree with you. It's good stuff. That's a really interesting article that you pulled up there. But yeah, good stuff. And we'll talk a little bit about AI in our next segment when we talk about ERP systems. We want to talk about some of the top ERP systems to consider for 2025. And this is not a structured countdown per se, but we are going to get input from the audience, and you're going to hear my feedback on some of the leading ERP systems and just how they compare to one another and some of the strengths and weaknesses. And again, being part of a company that's tech agnostic at Third Stage Consulting, we're independent. We're not affiliated with software vendors. That gives us a certain amount of flexibility and leeway to be honest about what we see in the marketplace. And this podcast obviously is meant to be tech agnostic and independent and objective as well. So in keeping with that theme, we're going to talk about the objective view of the top ERP systems of 2025. And then later in the show, we will also talk about how to go through a business transformation without necessarily needing to invest heavily in technology. So if during the segment we talk about ERP systems, you don't like what you hear, you decide you don't want to invest in any new technology, that's okay too. We've got an option or a solution or a roadmap to share with you on how you can implement business transformation changes without necessarily investing heavily in new technology. So be sure to stick around. We're going to cover all that and more. But first, we're going to take a quick break. We'll be back with more Transformation Ground Control. Hi, this is Eric Kimberling with Third Stage Consulting, and I want to invite you to join our annual tech agnostic conference called Digital Stratosphere. Digital Stratosphere is a conference that features some of the industry's brightest minds, greatest thinkers, and it's a great opportunity to network with peers, other industry people, other CIOs, other project team members that are going through digital transformations or ERP implementations. We've got a great lineup of speakers this year. It's a 3-day event, a lot of great entertainment, networking opportunities. I'll be there as one of the keynote speakers, along with some of my favorite speakers in the industry as well, both within Third Stage Consulting, but also outside the company as well. So I encourage you to check it out and learn more. You can go to stratosphere2024.com to learn more about the event. You can see the agenda, the way it's shaping up, and you can see some of the past testimonials of people that have attended. And the event is October 2nd through the 4th, 2024. It's going to be based in Denver, Colorado, downtown Denver, beautiful downtown Denver in the fall, which is a great time to visit Denver if you haven't been. Again, stratosphere2024.com. Check out the agenda. Check out our early bird pricing for passes. And the other beautiful things, if you can't be here in person in Denver, which we hope you can, but if you can't, you can also join remotely as well. We have virtual passes available as well, so you're able to join from wherever in the world you might want to join from. So stratosphere2024.com, check it out, and I hope to see you there.
The last thing you want to have happen is for your digital transformation to end up in court. I've been doing this for 20 years and I have seen everything. My name is Marcus Harris. I'm a software and technology attorney focusing my practice on drafting and negotiating software-related contracts and litigating software disputes across the country. Feel free to reach out to us at taftlaw.com. We'd love to talk to you about the litigation process and what you can expect.
Hello, welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 182. My name is Eric Kimberling, here with Darian Chwialkowski. You can find new episodes of this show every Wednesday by going to transformationgroundcontrol.com. And again, this is the podcast that covers everything related to digital transformation from a tech agnostic and independent perspective. The show is produced by Major Tom Productions and sponsored by Third Stage Consulting. So thanks for being here today. We've got a interesting conversation, sort of a non-traditional format we're going to go through here in our next segment. We're going to talk about the top 20 or the top ERP systems for 2025. And we're going to talk about how they compare to one another. And we're actually going to use this as a forum to inform, at least provide one of the data points and how we put together our top 10 ranking of top ERP systems for 2025, which will become part of our annual digital transformation report that we publish each year. That'll come out here in the fall. And this is sort of just one of many data points we're going to capture here today. So by listening to this podcast, providing your feedback, you are indirectly informing and shaping the way we put together that top 10 list here this year. So thanks for being here. But we're just going to dive in and talk a bit about top 10 systems in no particular order. We're just going to sort of walk through some of the leading ERP systems and talk about how they compare to one another. When we're doing these top 10 rankings of different top ERP systems in the market, there's so many different variables, as you can imagine, in terms of how you would evaluate a system. You could base it largely on functional capabilities. What can the software do? Does it fit what it is you need as a business? Does it fit your industry? Are the capabilities mature? There's a lot of sort of sub dimensions within that, but functional capabilities or functionality in general is oftentimes where organizations hone in their software evaluation efforts. So that's one criteria is functionality. Another capability or another evaluation criteria that's oftentimes used is going to be what kind of ecosystem supports that product. So in other words, are we able to find good resellers, good implementation partners, good consultants, good technologists that really know the software, have experience with the software? Do we have representation for that software vendor in our part of the world? Those are the types of questions that we often ask. You might have a great product that on paper fits all your features and functionality needs, but if there's no ecosystem locally to support the implementation or to provide the resources you need to be successful in your implementation, that sort of waters down or dilutes the capabilities of the software or the advantages that the software itself might have. So you also have to look at the ecosystem. What kind of support is available for the product in terms of the implementation, post-implementation, ongoing support, et cetera. Another thing that is becoming more important over time, and it wasn't as important, I'd say 10 years ago, but I think it's becoming more important as you evaluate potential ERP systems and you look at what are some of the best ERP systems in the marketplace, is this sort of evolution of ERP systems becoming strictly an application or a set of applications and becoming more of a platform. So in other words, giving us a platform to develop and create new features and functionalities that might be unique to us, or taking advantage of third-party software providers that have developed certain capabilities or certain applications on that platform. So in other words, we're looking not just at the software itself, the application itself, but we're also looking at the platform that it enables. What kind of platform does it open up for us? Does it give us additional tools and capabilities to continue to grow and evolve as a company? Does it give us access to third-party apps, third-party developers, third-party software providers that have provided different apps or different capabilities on that same platform? That's another feature or function or a evaluation criteria, if you will, that we'll often look at. So those are probably the biggest three. And then you start to get into other things. Of course, cost is always a factor. So we want to know how much does the software cost, not only for the subscription fees or the licenses themselves, but also the implementation too. If when we go to implement the software, how much is it going to cost us? And we really have to look at it from a total cost of ownership perspective. And then there's also some other intangible sorts of evaluation criteria too. There's things like what kind of user interface does it have? Is it going to be easy for our people to learn? Is the product? How complex is the product? Is it overly complex for our organization, or is it not complex enough for our organization, depending on who we are? So when you look at all these different criteria, you can see how it can become overwhelming to evaluate different ERP systems in the marketplace. And that's part of why when we put these top 10 rankings out every year, there's always a lot of conversation behind it. There's always a lot of people that agree with whoever's at the top or toward the top of the list, and there's a lot of people that disagree. And what's really interesting about these conversations, and I love doing these top 10 lists, even though they're largely subjective, and I can make an argument for or against any top 10 list we put out just because there's so many different factors you have to consider. But one of the most fascinating things about it is it stimulates a lot of conversation. No matter who's number one or who's not number one, it always stimulates conversation. There's a lot of discussion around why is that vendor number one? Why isn't someone else number one? What are some of the situations where it might be a different top 10 list? And that's really the way you have to look at these. Is top 10 lists are great to just give you sort of a top level, high level comparison of different ERP systems, but it's not something that you want to use as sort of your end all be all. Just like you don't want to use the Gartner's Magic Quadrant as the sole or the primary decision point, because those are so subjective and there's so many variables that are probably unique to you as an organization that might give you a different outcome or a different evaluation of different systems in the market. So that's sort of the backdrop of the importance of top 10 lists, some of the weaknesses of the top 10 list, as well as how you might consider comparing different ERP systems. And I'd love to hear from the audience, when you look at I'll ask you to be as objective as possible. I know some of you might have trouble being objective because you might just know one part of the world or one system that you're part of that ecosystem. But when you think objectively about the different systems in the marketplace, the different technologies out there, I'd love to hear your feedback on what most excites you. What software vendors do you think are making the biggest advances in terms of some of the things I talked about. Of course, we haven't even talked about AI yet, and specific capabilities like AI, predictive analytics, and things of that nature. But I'd love to hear your feedback on just kind of what's your general state of the union or your general assessment of different systems that are out there in the marketplace right now. Are there any certain software vendors that you're particularly excited about, or you think you have a particularly strong strategy, strong product offering, or something else that makes them worthy of being in our top 10 list? I'd love to hear your feedback below. And I'm watching the stream here across all the platforms for anyone that comments here. And thank you all for being here today and chiming in where you're joining from today. Truly global community. Really appreciate having you all here. So here's a first comment that I'll pull up here from Ashish on LinkedIn. Ashish says, factors such as vendor lock-in, licensing complexity, user groups and forums that support and share implementation woes. That's a really good point, and something I did not mention. When we're evaluating potential ERP systems, we have to not only look at the features and functions and capabilities, the general ecosystem that I talked about, price, risk, complexity, et cetera. All that stuff I mentioned before, that's all good stuff. But Ashish mentioned some really good factors, some additional factors you want to consider too. Are you locked into one vendor? Is the licensing overly complex? Is it something that's going to create escalating costs and risk for you in the future? That's something we really have to think about, because a lot of cloud providers are good at getting you sort of locked in or getting your foot in the door with them. But then over time, there's a lot of escalation clauses and things that can kick in that'll cause your costs and your risk to go up over time. And then Ashish also mentioned user groups and forums that support and share implementation woes. So, do you have access to user groups? Are there different support mechanisms to support you not only during your implementation, but post implementation as an ongoing long-term user of the product? Are you going to have the support you need? So that's something that's very important to keep an eye on. I want to get into a couple other comments here before we chime in and start talking about specific vendors, but this is from Dan on YouTube. Dan says, don't you think it'd be more useful to compare the top 10 for each vertical industry, like automotive, for instance? And yes, that is a follow-up that we do. Typically, we publish our top 10 list that's sort of a generic ranking across industries, across geographies, across different company sizes, which is very difficult to do because there is no quote-unquote average company that is just industry agnostic. Every company has its own industry needs and specific things that it focuses on. But generally, we start by publishing the top 10 that's sort of across the board general ranking, and then we will follow up that top 10 ranking with top 10 for specific industry verticals. And then we'll also do it based on company size and things of that nature. So different situational top 10 rankings too. But even then, to your point, if we were to pull up, say, a top 10 ranking for automotive, even within automotive, now you get into a lot of nuances and differing factors that are going to differentiate different companies that have different priorities and different needs, different strategies, which for any given individual company is going to result in a different top 10 list potentially. So that's why you have to take these top 10 lists with a grain of salt, even if they are specific to your industry. It can be a good starting point. It could be a good data point or a good input to maybe narrow down to a short list or even a long list of potential software solutions, but you don't want that to be the end all be all evaluation approach that you take. So you want to make sure that you look beyond that. So, but I think you do have a good point here that, looking at industry capabilities, industry features is also very important as well. I'm just going to jump into the audience comments and questions here. This is from Ashish on LinkedIn. He says, I'm a bit biased SAP since the last 22 years. He's been drinking the SAP Kool-Aid. So at least you acknowledge it. You're drinking the Kool-Aid. I drank the Kool-Aid for SAP early in my career when I was an SAP consultant. So I understand where you're coming from. I didn't do it for 22 years, but I did it for long enough to know that I was drinking the Kool-Aid. So thanks for being here, Ashish. I'd love to hear your feedback on S4HANA and some of the path forward. We're actually going to talk about S4HANA here in just a moment. Here's an interesting comment from Gary on LinkedIn. He says, my clients are smaller manufacturers. Your comment regarding complexity rings true. So, looking at really who you are as an organization and also where you're headed, what do you want to be? What are you trying to become in the next 3 to 5 to 10 years? That largely influences the type of ERP systems you're going to want to consider. On one hand, if you're a small or mid-sized organization, whether you're in manufacturing or any other industry, you want to make sure you have a system or you choose a system and implement a system that fits your needs today, but also something you can grow into and supports your needs in the longer term and really allows you to scale as an organization. Those are some of the things you've got to factor in as well. This is why a lot of times organizations that are mid-market companies, a lot of times they struggle with, do we go with something like an SAP S/4HANA or Oracle Fusion, knowing that those are big, complex tier one systems that we could definitely grow into. We can become a multi-billion dollar or multinational organization and probably fit pretty well within those two products, but it might be overly complex for who we are today and who we're going to be for the next few years. And so you have that trade-off you've got to make, or you've got to figure out and navigate. Do we go ahead and just make that leap now to something complex like an S/4HANA or Oracle Fusion, or do we stick with maybe a larger, more robust tier two provider like an Infor or an Epicor, even looking at different platforms like Salesforce or NetSuite has its own platform too, that with third-party development on top of it that could provide certain capabilities that you need. So there's sort of like you've got your current state where you are today. What's going to be a good fit today might be something that's a little bit different in terms of where you're headed in the future. If you're a high growth company doing a lot of acquisitions, you've got a lot of private equity money behind you, there's a different mindset and a different type of system you're probably going to be looking at than if you're more of a steady growth, more mature organization that's been around for longer. Maybe you just have slower, steadier growth and you don't have grand ambitions to scale quickly. Then you might have a different short list. You might have a different top 10 list that fits better for you. So those are some of the things that you've got to figure out here too. We're here talking about some of the leading ERP systems to consider in 2025 and beyond. We've got a lot more to cover, but first we're going to take a quick break. We'll be back with more Transformation Ground Control. People oftentimes ask me how I built such a strong social media following on YouTube and LinkedIn and Facebook and other outlets. And the fact of the matter is it took me a long time to build a following through a lot of trial and error, making a lot of mistakes. Had I known that there were companies out there that could help me build my brand, I would have done that a long time ago. I didn't know that, but the good news is that there is today a consulting firm that will help you through building your own personal brand through some of their training programs. The company is called Roloff Consulting, and if you're familiar with Emma Roloff, she's someone that I've had on this podcast before, and she's well known in the digital transformation space as well as the sales space. And she's big on TikTok, YouTube, and LinkedIn. And she and her husband have started a training course and a training company that focuses on helping people build their personal brands and helping them to sell themselves digitally. So whether you're a salesperson that's trying to reach more customers or you're an individual that's just trying to build your personal brand, that's something that they help with through their training programs. And they've offered listeners of this podcast a free 5-day LinkedIn challenge. And I encourage you to check it out. I've included a link below for this podcast. If you go to the podcast notes, you'll find a link that gets you free access to this 5-day challenge where you'll get step-by-step guidance. You'll get real results. So you'll get some tangible results from the program. And you also get a special offer at the end of it. So it's exclusive to listeners of this podcast. Be sure to check out the link below if you want to work on building your personal brand, or if you're in sales and you're trying to reach more people. Whatever the case may be, check it out. It's free to listeners of this podcast. You can check it out via the link below.
Interested in working for a company that truly values your unique skills and experience? Here at Third Stage, we don't hire based on resumes alone. We look at the full candidate, experience, and willingness to provide excellent service for our clients. Within a technology, independent, and agnostic consulting firm, you have the opportunity to learn across industries with a diverse group of clients. Our consultants also have the opportunity to diversify their portfolio and learn across technology systems. If you're interested in joining a high-growth entrepreneurial organization, please reach out to us at work@thirdstage-consulting.com.
Hello, welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 182. My name is Eric Kimberling here at Darian and Chwialkowski. You can find new episodes of this show every Wednesday by going to transformationgroundcontrol.com. You can also find past episodes of this show by going to that same website, transformationgroundcontrol.com. And this is the podcast that covers everything related to digital transformation from a tech agnostic and independent perspective. The show is produced by Major Tom Productions and sponsored by Third Stage Consulting. So thank you for being here today. We're here talking today in this segment about the top 10 ERP systems to consider for 2025 and beyond. Dan also mentions on YouTube that when you're evaluating different ERP systems, another dimension to look at is revenue, number of employees, number of sites, and international footprint of the customers. Great point, especially if you are an international organization. You want to see that there's other organizations out there like you using the product, and you also want to know, how big the vendor is and how capable the vendor is of supporting your needs. Not only the vendor directly, but as I think it was Ashish or someone mentioned earlier, you also want to look at that overall ecosystem, the user groups, the implementation, technical consultants that are available in your region or your part of the world, that sort of thing. Comment here from Hillary on LinkedIn. Hillary says, my clients are government profits. We bring them different solutions as far as top players in this space. I'm not sure what I think I'm misunderstanding the question here, but I think the point here is that in government or any other industry vertical, you're going to have different players that you consider, different products that you're going to look at. In the government space, when we do software evaluations, we look at a very different subset of ERP systems compared to a manufacturing organization, whatever the case may be. So thank you for your comment there, your feedback, Hillary. Hillary also would love to hear the best ERPs for finance and insurance companies. We'll try to cover that here as we get through the conversation. So appreciate all the comments we're getting so far. This is great stuff. Really appreciate it. And I hope you keep the comments coming. I wanted to sort of chime in now or jump in a little bit and talk about specific solutions in the market and sort of get your feedback. And I'll share, some of my real high level observations about these different systems. Again, as I'm going through this, keep in mind, we are not affiliated with any software vendor we're talking about here today, nor are we affiliated with any of the software vendors we're not going to mention here today. So this is just us being independent tech agnostic advisors to companies, want to share what we think as far as pros and cons of these different systems, but also more importantly, I want to hear your feedback on what you think. You might agree with some of the stuff I say, you might disagree, you might have some completely different observations you want to throw in. So I really love to hear your feedback here today. And I want to start with SAP. So we were talking about SAP just a moment ago. SAP's S/4HANA is sort of their flagship product that they are that they've been promoting for several years now, close to a decade now. S/4HANA has been sort of the flagship SAP product. They have a large subset of their customer base, their legacy customer base, that are still using ECC or R3 that have not yet made the transition to S/4HANA. S/4HANA brings a whole new architecture and platform compared to legacy SAP systems. The HANA sort of real-time database platform that they've built HANA on, or S/4HANA on that HANA platform, has been sort of a real change in strategy for SAP. So part of it was to provide faster performance for their databases, and especially when you get into analytics and now with AI, this can be a really big deal. But just getting fast access to data, and also HANA's or SAP's building of S/4HANA on the HANA platform also reduced or eliminated SAP's dependency on Oracle to provide Oracle databases, which in the past SAP had relied on Oracle technology as some of the underlying database technology. As you probably can imagine, SAP and Oracle are fierce competitors in the ERP space, but they were also supplier and customer, on the back end technology up until now. So with SAP HANA, with that platform, they've sort of mitigated that risk, if you will, or that dependency on Oracle for its database technology. So those are a couple things, or a couple advantages, I suppose you could say, that HANA brings to the table. Just like any past SAP products, though, S/4HANA is very complex. It's very broad. It's very robust. You can do a lot of stuff, which is great if you're a diversified multinational organization. But where it gets tricky is if you are a mid-sized organization, there's going to be cases where it might be too much for you. It's too much complexity, too much risk, too much cost. But if you're trying to scale for growth, you want to become that multi-billion-dollar multinational organization in the coming years, S/4HANA could be a great platform to help you get there. So I'd love to hear feedback from the audience here. If you've used SAP before, if you're in the SAP community, would love to hear your feedback here on what your thoughts are on S/4HANA. One thing I'll mention is we've seen some clients, and this is becoming less true over time, but it's still true to some degree, but we're seeing some clients that still struggle with some of the capabilities that they were accustomed to in ECC, the legacy SAP product that has not yet made it over to the S/4HANA platform. In other words, they haven't transitioned every single nook and cranny and feature and function of ECC, has not yet made that migration over to S/4HANA. Especially when you get into some more complex manufacturing processes or advanced planning, things of that nature, there just simply isn't that maturity and that established functionality that ECC had for decades, which is understandable. S4HANA hasn't even been a full decade yet. They're coming up on a decade, but it hasn't been a full decade, whereas ECC had been around for multiple decades, a lot of R&D dollars, a lot of time to build those capabilities. So those are some things to consider. There's also the issue of SAP's mandate or its sunset date for legacy customers to move off of ECC. That's creating a lot of anxiety and fear and doubt in the SAP community. And it's also putting a strain on SAP consultants and implementation technology providers to where there's a spike in demand that is difficult for a lot of organizations to satisfy or to keep up with. So those are some of the things we've got to consider as well. Is it the right time for us to make that jump? And is our implementation plan realistic in that nature based on availability of resources and whatnot? So those are some of the strengths and weaknesses of SAP. Again, I started my career as a certified SAP consultant. For the first 3 years of my career, all I did was SAP stuff. And this is back, R3, which is the major platform before ECC back in the late 90s. So this is a long time ago, but I sort of grew up in the SAP space for better, for worse. And, I think actually my understanding of SAP has sort of shaped my opinion of the ERP space in general. But there's some different pros and cons to SAP and the S4HANA product. So love to hear your feedback on it. S4HANA, what do you think the future of S4HANA is? Where do you see it fitting best in the industry? And while I'm waiting for you to answer that question here today, I want to get to another comment here from Ashish. Ashish on LinkedIn says, we also evaluate the interoperability, especially for integrations, API support, ecosystem partnerships, and install base across a wide range of hyperscalers for cloud implementations, having to follow the roadmap and maturity model. So great point. Back when I was talking about the platform, looking at your ERP system, not just as an application, but giving you a platform to do integration, to look at third-party application providers and maybe have built some sort of app or capability on that specific platform that gives you sort of the best of both worlds, really, if you think about it. And what you're alluding to here, Ashish, is that combination of the best of both worlds, which is getting an off-the-shelf system that's established and proven, but also having the flexibility of a platform that opens up additional providers and additional things that you can build yourself. If you do want to do a custom app and you want to do it on, an SAP platform or a NetSuite platform, whatever it is, knowing that you've got that platform and you've got the tools to be able to do that is extremely powerful. And that can provide a lot of flexibility, a lot of options for organizations going forward. The one thing I will say, though, is sometimes when you get into these platforms and these interoperability based solutions, sometimes it can get overwhelming. It opens up so many options that it provides almost too much flexibility, too many options. And a lot of organizations find that overwhelming, or they find that actually plays to their strengths, or I'm sorry, to their weaknesses as an organization. And just to give you an example, if you're an organization that's highly decentralized, you've grown a lot through acquisition, or you're a multinational, but you're very decentralized and you have independent ways of operating throughout the world, and you're trying to move to a model now to where you have more of a consistent operating model and you've got more standardized processes and operation models and things of that nature, actually having that interoperable, flexible solution can fuel the weakness that you're trying to move away from. And that's why a lot of times organizations in that mode will say, well, we want to go with an SAP S4HANA because for better or for worse, it's a little bit less flexible and it gives us a certain amount of standardization and rigidity. And I don't mean rigidity in a bad way necessarily, but some organizations want that. They want their ERP system to bring the structure, the consistency, the rigidity, whatever you want to call it. And that's why they go that direction. Now, what you have to recognize is that has a different set of risks. If we go, for example, if we move away from a real flexible, interoperable sort of solution, and let's use Microsoft Dynamics as an example here, and I'll come back to Dynamics 365 here in a second. But let's just talk about D365. D365 is a very flexible solution, and it's got a lot of good integration tools, a lot of the interoperability that Ashish is mentioning, a lot of flexibility if you want to custom code anything or change anything with the software. All stuff that you might consider as a strength. But if you're an organization that's already struggling with inconsistent operations and you have too many disparate ways of operating, implementing something like a Microsoft D365 might fit that culture, but it might actually prevent you from accomplishing what you're trying to accomplish, which is to become more standardized, if that is indeed what you're trying to do. So that's why some organizations will say, well, we don't want a Microsoft D365 because that just fuels some of that flexibility or that inconsistency that we're trying to move away from. Let's go with more of an S/4HANA model to where it's more structured, more standardized, gives us a little bit more consistency as an organization. So, that's one of those intangible strategic things you've got to consider. And you also have to recognize if you do go that latter route where you're that decentralized, inconsistent company that's trying to become more scalable, more standardized, that's great. S/4HANA might help you get there, but now you've got to recognize that that's going to introduce a bunch of culture shock to your organization, which is a whole nother set of risks that you've got to manage that has nothing to do with the technology, really. It has more to do with the organization and how you're going to navigate that. So that's just some of the ways you want to think through the whole evaluation process, not only to get to a decision on is SAP the right answer, or is it Microsoft, or is it some other solution. You also want to not only get to that answer of what the right technology is, but you also want to understand what's our implementation strategy and what's our overall rollout strategy based on what it is we're implementing. And if we're implementing S/4HANA, we might have to invest more in change management because it's probably going to be more of a culture shock and it's more of a change for us. And we have to spend more time reconciling broken business processes or inconsistent business processes. Not a bad thing. There's nothing wrong with that, but you just have to make sure you factor that into your overall plan and that you've budgeted for it and you've got a realistic time frame that reflects all that. So those are some of the considerations that get well beyond just choosing technology per se, but also choosing technology and choosing a rollout in a transformation strategy that's going to help you get there. Additional feedback here as it relates to S/4HANA before I move on to other software vendors. This is from Hillary on LinkedIn. Hillary says, I work for a Fortune 100 on ECC, which is an SAP product, a legacy SAP product. I work for a Fortune 100 on SAP ECC, and I agree the strategy to upgrade to S4 was very iterative, but the SAP Treasury model I upgraded went very smoothly. So that's great to hear. That's good. It's always good to hear a good success story, especially when it involves a big product like SAP and when it involves a big Fortune 100 company. Anytime you say that you've been successful in that environment, I'd say, there's probably a lot of good stuff we can learn from that because so many large, complex organizations do struggle with their implementations, not just for SAP, but for any technology, given the complexity of the business. So that's great feedback. This is from Ard on LinkedIn. Ard says, we do see customers using these big ERP platforms. Most of the time, these are the OEMs and indeed multi-everything companies. With ASML as an example, they do have a big impact on the supply chain, high-tech companies in the first tier and below. This has also an impact on the interoperability, overarching the digitalization of the supply chain instead of those individual companies. So thank you for your feedback there, Ard. This comment here, let me get to another point here from Carmen on LinkedIn. Hello, Carmen. Good to see you. I think she's in Chicago as well. Someone else was in Chicago that commented. I believe Carmen is based there as well. Carmen says, right on point, something to consider is how you're pushing out your content and housing your data when considering your platform. So really good point. And this is a great example of this the sorts of evaluation criteria you need to look at that fall outside the realm of your normal let's look at the features and functions of the software. But what Carmen's alluding to here is something even deeper and looking at how is data structured and how are you going to get data from your legacy systems to your new ERP system. Those are all things that need to be carefully considered as well. So thank you for your feedback there, Carmen. Another comment from Ard is that no need to explain. I guess the SMBs in the lower tiers are a lot smaller with less resources. Risks to high for move to these bigger platforms, at least here in the Netherlands. We're here talking about some of the leading ERP systems to consider in 2025 and beyond. We've got a lot more to cover, but first we're going to take a quick break. We'll be back with more Transformation Ground Control. Could you whisper in my ear? I recently published my first book. It's called The Final Countdown: Strategies to Reach the Third Stage of Digital Transformation. And I wrote this book because I really wanted to find a concise way to share some of my knowledge around digital strategy and how to get started on a digital transformation journey. So in this book, I cover 3 different sections. I cover the people, process, and technology aspects of transformation, with the idea that it's meant to be a starting point, a launching pad for organizations and team members that are going through digital transformations. So I encourage you to buy this book. You can get it electronically, you can get it paperback, or you can get it in hard copy, as I'm holding here in front of you. You can get it by going to thefinalcountdown.com. You can also search for it on Amazon if you shop at Amazon. Otherwise, just go to thefinalcountdown.com. Love to hear your feedback on this book as well. So I hope you check it out and hope you enjoy.
I'm excited to share our newly released 2024 Digital Enterprise Operations Report. This free download is available on the Third Stage website at thirdstage-consulting.com. This report is truly packed full of technology-independent and agnostic insights for your project to ensure that you're strategically optimized for success. Download your copy today with the QR code in front of me or visit our website for more details.
Hello, welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 182. My name is Eric Kimberling here at Darian and Chwialkowski. You can find new episodes of this show every Wednesday by going to transformationgroundcontrol.com. You can also find past episodes of this show by going to that same website, transformationgroundcontrol.com. And this is the podcast that covers everything related to digital transformation from a tech agnostic and independent perspective. The show is produced by Major Tom Productions and sponsored by Third Stage Consulting. So thank you for being here today. We're here talking today in this segment about the top 10 ERP systems to consider for 2025 and beyond. Here's a comment from Hillary again on LinkedIn. Says, I'm implementing a client on Sage Intacct ERP, which is not highly customizable. In hindsight, Microsoft D365 would have been a better choice for their customized needs. So great point. You do want to look at your ability to customize if you need to, and Microsoft tends to provide a good tool set to customize, to integrate with other third-party systems and whatnot. I'm not saying Sage Intacct is bad at it, but Microsoft generally has more functionality, more features, more open architecture, more of a lot of things that a mid-size or even a larger organization might be looking for. Whereas Sage Intacct is generally more of a smaller ERP system that's for smaller organizations when you compare it to Microsoft D365. In fact, let's shift gears, and I want to actually talk about D365 here. And by the way, while I'm pulling this up, I also want to invite you to download our 2024 ERP report. It's a digital transformation and ERP report that we published several months ago. And this is the report that we're going to publish again this fall that will feature the top 10 rankings that we have. And so again, appreciate all the feedback and the great comments that you're all providing here today. If you scan the QR code right here on your screen, top right of or top left of your screen, I'll also include a link to this in the description below wherever you're listening or watching. But if you scan that QR code, that'll get you access to our 2024 ERP report, which includes our top 10 ranking for this year. So you can use that as sort of a reference point while we're talking here today, or as a takeaway to kind of see how we ranked different systems last year coming into this year. We're going to do the same thing going into 2025 as well. So again, love to hear your feedback. If you get a chance to scan that and read it, or just sort of scan through it while we're talking here today, I'd love to hear your feedback and what you might change as it relates to that ranking, because obviously every year the ranking does change, and I'd love to hear your feedback there. So let's get to Microsoft D365. This is a product that we've talked a little bit about. I've talked about S/4HANA in a bit of details, but let's talk about Microsoft D365, largely because it's so different than SAP when you compare it to S/4HANA. S/4HANA, as I mentioned, is really good for multinational companies, especially multinational companies that are trying to standardize their operations and become sort of a more consistent operating model and set of business processes. Whereas Microsoft can enable that. But it also gives you flexibility that could be good or bad depending on what it is you're trying to accomplish. And just to clarify, when I talk about Microsoft D365 for now or for this conversation, I'm talking about finance and operations. So I guess that's worth noting. Microsoft D365 actually has two different solutions. You have finance and operations, which is more for larger enterprises, more complex organizations. There's a lot more features and functions within D365 F&O. And that's generally, the types of companies that are considering S/4HANA might also consider D365 finance and operations. D365 could also mean Business Central, which is its sort of the small and mid-market SaaS solution. And that Business Central is more like an Oracle NetSuite. I'd say it's more likely to compete with Oracle NetSuite, which I'm going to come back to them and here in a moment. They're more likely to compete with Oracle NetSuite, less likely to compete with or be considered by the same customers as SAP S/4HANA or even Oracle Fusion. So just to clarify that, but Microsoft D365 has flexibility. It's got the Microsoft look and feel. It's got the integration to Office D365. Like I said, a lot of good flexibility and integration capabilities. It's a good platform. They have a pretty unique model, and they have all the pretty large network of ISVs, they call them, independent software vendors, where they've taken the D365 product and they've done something to it to tailor it for a certain industry or a certain function, or provide some sort of features and functions that the core D365 product doesn't have. So that whole ISV model, that whole third-party provider model can be really powerful. And I know it's top of mind because Hillary on LinkedIn was just talking about government. And in government, for example, you have Tyler Technologies that had built their solution that's specific to the government space, but they built that on the Microsoft Dynamics platform. And they're just one example. There's a lot of providers out there that have taken Microsoft D365 and done something to it to make it more suitable for a certain industry. So that kind of opens up a lot of options, a lot of tailored and highly focused options that you may not otherwise get from other software providers. Or if you're going to get it from another software provider, you're going to have to highly customize that software to do the equivalent of what an ISV may have already done with Microsoft D365. So that's something to consider as well. D365 can also be a good option for companies that are sort of in the mid-market now, but they're really scaling up for growth. It could be a good sort of a good alternative to an SAP S/4HANA or Oracle Fusion. One thing I will say, though, probably the biggest thing we see our clients struggle with as it relates to Microsoft D365, there's actually two things that we see our clients struggle with the most. One is that flexibility that I talked about, the strength of the product being flexibility and ease of use and that sort of thing can actually turn on you. If you're trying to standardize, you're trying to get people to change, you're trying to adopt, what the software vendors might refer to as best practices. Those are all things that you might actually work against you if you're a Microsoft customer. And we see clients of ours struggle with that pretty immensely. And the other thing that companies struggle with when they work with Microsoft D365, we found, is the whole ecosystem. I know that was one of the common threads or the common comments I'm seeing in the chat here on the various streams, is that the ecosystem, what kind of support is out there? And there's a lot of options out there in the Microsoft community, I would say. I'd say Microsoft probably has more VARs and more consultants and options available to you on the services side than a lot of ERP providers. But having said that, there's a lot of inconsistency, a lot of discrepancies between the really strong Microsoft providers and the ones that aren't so strong. It's really easy to become a Microsoft partner. I mean, they don't have a lot of controls in place to really weed out the garbage, if you will, in the space. So the good news is you're probably gonna have a lot of options. The bad news is you're gonna have a lot of options that may not be worth considering. So it's harder to narrow down to the implementation partners and options that are most suitable for you. So those are some things you've got to consider as it relates to D365. And here's a comment from Ashish as it relates to D365. She says, yes, Microsoft D365 would have been a consideration as it provides flexibility on the database hosting. Some European countries are restrictive towards hosting European data outside of Europe, say in North America. This is a big issue with S/4HANA's central location. Really good point. That is something you have to consider, is where is the data being hosted, especially if you're moving towards a cloud solution. You want to know, in many cases, you have to know where that data is being housed. And especially as you deal with smaller software vendors where there's less options on where the data is hosted, where the applications are hosted, that can become a bigger problem. I think the good thing with SAP and Microsoft and Oracle as well is they're such big software vendors that they have multiple data centers and they have multiple locations where data can be hosted. And in some cases, like S/4HANA and SAP, they're actually working with a number of the hyperscalers like Amazon Web Services and Azure, and different providers that can provide the hosting. So it gives you some flexibility on who hosts the data, where it gets hosted, that sort of thing. So great point, though, something that you do have to factor in and make sure that you've captured here. There's a question from Darian on LinkedIn. Darian says, what types of companies are best for D365? Is there a certain industry that leans towards Microsoft D365 more? It's a great question. I'd say, the companies that lean towards D365 in general are going to be companies that value flexibility, companies that are already Microsoft shops. Maybe they're already using Power BI or Power Apps, the Power Platform. Maybe they're using an old legacy Microsoft Dynamics product. Those tend to be the types of companies that stay with Microsoft. But as far as like net new customers that are switching applications or switching providers altogether, the ones most likely to switch to D365 are the ones that are going through a lot of growth. Ones that, a lot of times there's certain functions that Microsoft's pretty good at compared to other systems like project management, for example. They're good at analytics and BI and reporting. So, companies that value that sort of those two capabilities as examples are going to be good fits for D365 potentially. Hillary on LinkedIn talks more about Microsoft D365 by saying Microsoft D365 has continuously come up very affordable from a 5-year cost of ownership perspective. Initial implementation cost is comparable, but their license fees are very affordable. Have you seen that same thing? And yes, I have seen that same thing. The software tends to be a bit less expensive when you compare it to an Oracle Fusion or S4HANA. The implementation itself can be less expensive because the product isn't quite as complex. But again, they can get more expensive than an S4HANA or an Oracle in some ways, in some cases, when you get caught in the trap of flexibility and customization. In other words, you start to derail the project because you're so focused on customizing the software or changing the software to fit different parts of how you operate throughout an organization just because you can. And just because you can change the software doesn't mean you should. And that's something you've got to keep in mind, especially with any ERP system, but especially with a product like Microsoft D365 that has that flexibility. So I'd say, yes, Microsoft can be cheaper, but can actually backfire and become more expensive real quickly if you don't manage it well, because it gives you the flexibility and the tools to be more flexible, which can actually add up or escalate your cost over time. Here's a great example of how I love hearing counterpoints and different points of view here. This is from Ard on LinkedIn. Ard says, well, I do not agree on the drawback of flexibility that turns against you. Hence, you still need to have an implementation plan and a digitalization strategy. So choosing a strong partner is paramount. And I actually totally agree with you. I think we're probably saying the same thing in that flexibility can turn against you if you don't have those things in place that you're talking about, Art. So if you don't have a solid implementation plan, a solid digitalization strategy, a really good partner, you don't have the right project governance and controls in place, you don't have the right change management strategy in place to ensure that people aren't resisting the change. If you don't have all those things in place, then yes, you are correct. Well, I'd say I'm correct that you are going to see the flexibility turn against you. But if you do have those things in place, as you mentioned, Ard, then you are correct. Then it shouldn't be a problem that turns against you. But the key is you have to have those things in place. And the problem is most organizations that we work with, their instincts are not to do those things that you just described, which is why they're hiring companies like your company or my company or other consultants out there. Here's a great question from Canada. This is from Harmony on YouTube. Harmony says, hello, Harmony from Canada here. Just started listening. If you're taking questions, when should a business integrate OMS into their ERP? Is ERP supply chain management module unable to scale? And so let me broaden that a little bit and just talk about integration in general. When should you integrate other systems in with ERP? I'd say, the easy answer is as much as you can. As much as you can integrate your back office sort of system of record ERP system with some of your more operational systems that are out there, some of your legacy systems, your regulatory systems. Most organizations are going to have multiple systems out there that they've got to integrate with. So you want to be able to integrate if you can, especially now with more focus on integrated workflows, integrated end-to-end processes, certainly with AI and analytics and things of that nature. You want to make sure that you integrate that data and that you aren't creating silos within multiple systems and silos of data, which is why so many organizations are moving to a new ERP system in the first place, is because they're trying to get away from that model of a very fragmented system, siloed data, et cetera. So I'd say the more you can integrate, the better, just as a general rule of thumb. Here's another comment or question from Mohammed on LinkedIn. Mohammed says, in which step of the digital transformation process do we need to exactly start cleaning up existing data? Is it before implementing or while implementing the D365 solution? And actually, I'll give you the same answer whether you're talking about D365 or any other ERP system. Is the sooner you can start cleaning up the data, the better. Data is very often the critical path, and it's oftentimes the thing that causes delays in projects. So if you can get a head start on that and start cleaning up your data now, start mapping your data to the new system now, and then, obviously by the time you get to testing, you can start volume testing the data. You can start testing data in addition to just testing the functional capabilities of the software. That's just going to put you ahead when it comes time to go live with your new system. So I'd say that's true whether you're talking about Microsoft D365 or any other system. I also want to shift gears now and talk about Oracle Fusion. We have not talked about Oracle Fusion much today, but I do want to talk about it, and we'll get to a couple other software vendors as well. Love to hear your feedback on Oracle Fusion. We don't see as much, just to be candid, we don't see as many clients implementing Oracle Fusion as we do, say, SAP S/4HANA or even Microsoft D365. So I don't know why that is. I don't think it's a reflection of market share. I think it's a bias in our client base for whatever reason. Or here's another hypothesis of why we don't have as many Oracle Fusion clients as we do SAP S/4HANA. We have a lot of S/4HANA clients right now, but there are a lot of troubled S/4HANA clients. So in other words, they've started the implementation, they've started the journey to S/4HANA, and they've run into trouble. In some cases, they failed, and then they hire us to come fix it, to come clean it up. So we are seeing a lot of recovery and remediation in the SAP space. We are not seeing that in Oracle. So that could be part of it. I'm not sure if there's a direct correlation or a science to that, but it's just, it's a factual point of data that may be biased and may be somewhat skewed, but that is something we're seeing. But having said that, I think Oracle Fusion is an interesting product because I feel like if you're looking at the two extremes we were just talking about, we were talking about SAP S/4HANA being sort of the standardized, really highly scalable, structured system. And then you've got Microsoft D365, which is sort of on the other extreme, at least for larger enterprises. And this is going to be more flexible, more of a platform rather than just an application. It's a lot of integration tools. It's pretty open architecture. A lot of very different products. SAP and Microsoft could not be much different in terms of just the architecture, the way the product's built, the types of customers that use them, et cetera. I view Oracle Fusion as sort of like in the middle. I feel like they're sort of like they have elements of both systems. They have some of the flexibility and some of the open architecture that Microsoft brings to the table. But Oracle Fusion also has that sort of standardized model, or a little bit more of a standardized model, somewhat like SAP. I wouldn't say they're as standardized. They're not as rigid. They're not as focused on common processes, common operating model, and all that stuff. But they are more that way than, say, a Microsoft D365. So Oracle Fusion, I view as a product that can actually be a really good balance, or sort of a best of both worlds. If you're an organization that's sort of stuck in two worlds, as I talked about before, you're stuck or torn between what you're doing today versus what you want to be in the future. I feel like Oracle Fusion can be a good way to give you the best of both what you need today, but also something that gives you some scalability to move to the future, especially if you're more flexible now. Maybe you're decentralized, maybe you're a bit, fragmented and inconsistent operationally, but you want to move towards more of a standardized model, a more consistent operating model. You want to start acting like one company. You want to truly scale with these common processes. I feel like Oracle Fusion sort of fits in the middle there. And that sort of rounds out like the big three vendors. You've got, SAP and Oracle SAP and Microsoft on the two extremes. And then you've got Oracle Fusion that's sort of in the middle, I'd say, in that continuum of general features and capabilities and things of that nature. So curious to hear from you all. Do any of you have experience with Oracle Fusion? What's your feedback? What do you see as the future of Oracle there? That would be a great thing to hear from you all here. We're here talking about some of the leading ERP systems to consider in 2025 and beyond. We've got a lot more to cover, but first we're going to take a quick break. We'll be back with more Transformation Ground Control.
Just tell me what you've got to say to me. I've been waiting for so long to hear.
I'm excited to share our newly released 2024 Digital Enterprise Operations Report. This free download is available on the Third Stage website at thirdstage-consulting.com. This report is truly packed full of technology-independent and agnostic insights for your project to ensure that you're strategically optimized for success. Download your copy today with the QR code in front of me or visit our website for more details.
Hi, this is Eric Kimberling with Third Stage Consulting and your host of Transformation Ground Control. I want to encourage you to read our Guide to Organizational Change Management. It's a free report or free guide that we publish. It's one that I actually wrote that talks about best practices and lessons learned as it relates to change management. So as you know, on this podcast, we cover a lot of stuff related to the human sides of change, organizational change management, including training, communications, org design, all kinds of stuff as it relates to change management. So if you're trying to learn more about change management or you're looking for more direction and ideas on how to get started on your change management strategy and your overall journey, be sure to check out this guide. You can read it by scanning the QR code on the screen in front of you or in the links below for this particular podcast episode. You can find a link to take you to the page that will allow you to register to go ahead and download that and read it for free. So be sure to check it out. It's the Guide to Organizational Change Management, written by yours truly. I hope you enjoy it. Let me know what you think, and hope you enjoy the rest of this episode.
I could never be the right kind of girl for you. I could never be your woman.
Hello, welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 182. My name is Eric Kimberling here at Darian and Chwialkowski. You can find new episodes of this show every Wednesday by going to transformationgroundcontrol.com. You can also find past episodes of the show by going to that same website, transformationgroundcontrol.com. And this is the podcast that covers everything related to digital transformation from a tech agnostic and independent perspective. The show is produced by Major Tom Productions and sponsored by Third Stage Consulting. So thank you for being here today. We're here talking today in this segment about the top 10 ERP systems to consider for 2025 and beyond. I think one of the other things to note about Oracle Fusion is that in addition to some of the things I just mentioned, Oracle Fusion also has a very strong focus on analytics, business intelligence, and anything to do with enterprise performance management, anything to do with numbers, basically. Oracle Fusion is particularly strong at that. That's historically been a real strong function and capability that they bring to the table. So that's something to keep in mind too when you're looking at Oracle Fusion. So love to hear your feedback on that as well. Here's a question that's unrelated to Oracle, but I do want to come back to Oracle Fusion here. This is from Fur on YouTube. Fur says, I implement ERP, specifically Odoo. How do I get clients at social media marketing a good choice? Odoo, how to get clients at social media a good choice? So the reason I bring this up is because it's the first time Odoo has come up. Odoo is a open source provider. It's an open source platform that we see a lot of smaller companies that are implementing it. I see Odoo as sort of a good alternative to an Oracle NetSuite or maybe Microsoft Business Central. And then here's maybe a more relevant direct question from Fur on YouTube. What do you think between Odoo versus D365 versus S4HANA versus Oracle Fusion? And what I'd say about Odoo is just it's a totally different solution. I mean, it couldn't, we're adding a whole nother layer here, a whole nother different type of product, which is open source. Odoo is extremely modular. So it's really good if you're sort of like an agile based organization. You just want to implement pieces of technology to get started, and then you want to build on that stack longer term. Odoo can be a great way to take that approach. Odoo also also offers sort of a freemium model, so you can use the product for free, which a lot of customers like, and that's how a lot of customers get started with Odoo. Is they just go get the CRM module or just one module, test it out, try it, they like it, they start to adopt it, they start to use it and see value, and then they start paying. The other thing to think about is Odoo, is a good product, but it does require, I'd say, it on one hand, it allows non-technical people to configure and set up the software. So it's meant to be sort of a low code, no code environment. So it's not meant to be a product that's real heavy from a technical perspective, but it does require a certain amount of maintenance as far as just the setup, and it almost creates more of a do-it-yourself requirement for the implementation, which leads me to another point. Is Odoo is very strong. They're a company based out of Belgium, out of Brussels, so they have a pretty strong presence in the Northern Europe regions, and the rest of Europe as well. They're becoming very prominent in Asia Pacific as well. They're starting to make headway in North America as well. So they are a global company, but you have to look at, in my part of the world, wherever you are, do we have the Odoo resources and the Odoo support that we might need locally within our country? And then you also want to make sure that it, with Odoo, you want to make sure it can handle some of the complexities of your business. If you're a complex manufacturer, or you're highly engineering based, if there's a heavy engineering component to your business, Odoo may not be a good fit. So you just want to really stress test the complexities of your business against what Odoo can or can't do. I will say, of all the systems out there, if I were going to do a top 10 list of the top 10 ERP systems with cult followings and just passionate loyalists, I would absolutely put Odoo number one. I don't know what it is about the Odoo community. I don't know if it's their marketing or the cult-like leadership of the, and when I say cult, I do not mean that in a bad way. But the Fabian, who's the CEO of Odoo, has like a cult-like following. I mean, people just really respect the guy and follow him. And anytime I talk about Odoo or put out an Odoo blog or a video, those perform really well. And I just get there's just a lot of support in the Odoo community. So I don't know how important that is to your evaluation or whether it is important at all, but it's just something that I find super fascinating and interesting, being an independent observer of the space here. So Odoo is another option. We're not getting a lot of comments here yet on Oracle Fusion, but we are getting comments or questions on other types of systems. This is from Civ on YouTube. Civ says, how do you evaluate IFS as a solution? And I actually think IFS is a very strong solution. And that was actually one of the ones I was going to get to here, but I'll get to it now since you brought it up. But IFS is a good solution for asset-intensive companies, companies that have a strong need for field service management. So if you think of like construction companies or utility companies, any company that has crews and assets out in the field or has very capital intensive, in terms of machinery and trucks and fleets and things of that nature. The reason IFS is so good at that, and the reason I bring up those capabilities, is because IFS tends to focus on those heavy industrial, capital intensive sorts of organizations. And they provide real strong capabilities in field service management, which is basically when you've got a crew out in the field. They're not in a manufacturing shop floor, but they're out in a field doing something. They're building something, they're repairing something, they're doing maintenance on a power line, whatever it is. IFS sort of fits that model really well. And they also have an enterprise asset management module or capability that's very strong too. So if you've got, again, heavy equipment and a lot of capital intensive aspects of your business, IFS is really well suited for that. So if you're in utilities, construction, et cetera, I would say, or telco, I would say IFS is something you may want to consider. IFS is one of those systems that's not trying to be everything to everyone, but they are a good option. If they're a good fit, they're probably a great fit, and otherwise they may not be worth looking at. That's okay. Exhibit A of what happens when I talk about Odoo. We're getting a lot of comments on Odoo now that came up. Mohammed on LinkedIn says Odoo is doing great work in Morocco, promoting their brand and services. Fur on YouTube says, I think the open source aspect of Odoo that developers really like. And then also related to Odoo, Vast CNC on YouTube says Odoo is great for customization, accessibility, business logic, is all in Python and fully open source. So it's a great point. Python was a good point. And I'm glad you brought up the fact that it's Python, fully open source. Those are important aspects of Odoo as well. Here's a system we haven't talked about yet, and that is Epicor. So I want to get to Epicor because Epicor is an interesting product. It's one that I've actually been pretty fascinated by for over a decade now. When I started my last company, Panorama Consulting, early on, especially, a lot of the clients were manufacturing types of organizations. And even today at third stage, over half of our revenue, half of our business is coming from manufacturing distribution. And so Epicor is just a product we see a lot in that space, especially in the mid-market. It's a good alternative to, if you're a manufacturer or a distribution type of company or a retailer, and you're big enough that you need sort of tier one ERP system capabilities, but you don't necessarily want to go with an Oracle Fusion or an S4HANA from SAP, Epicor could be a great option. they've got a great product that I feel like Epicor has always had a pretty good product, but they've now augmented what I'd say is a good product with more of a cloud-based solution or solutions with a few different products that they offer. And they have multiple products like Profit 21 and et cetera. So there's multiple systems that, Epicor Kinetic is another one. So there's multiple systems that Epicor provides or offers to the space, depending on what vertical you're in. But if you're in manufacturing and distribution, you're mid-size, it's a great product. They've always had a good product, but now I feel like the company as a whole, and just looking at sort of the intangible aspect of the leadership and the direction of the company, I think that's very strong. They have a really strong executive team that they've put in place over the last 5 or 7 years. And I think now, finally, after 10 or 20 years of turmoil in the Epicor space, where if you recall, or if you knew, Epicor was changing hands. The ownership was changing a lot, different private equity firms coming in and out. And it created this sort of instability as a company. Again, good product, but the direction of the company was sort of like a whipsaw effect for a while there. So there was some uncertainty around Epicor's future, I'd say 10 years ago, but in more recent years, they've really solidified their executive team. And I think they have a much clearer strategy now. And they've also invested more heavily in their ecosystem. So they've built out more partners and they've become more partner friendly. Whereas 10 years ago, there's a lot of tension between Epicor as the company and some of the Epicor partners, whereas some of that has dissipated now. So I just feel like there's a intangible strategy and leadership and direction that the company has now that they didn't have before. So that, in my opinion, that makes Epicor a very strong option especially if you're a mid-market manufacturing and distribution company. If you do complex manufacturing, make to order or engineer to order, Epicor can be a great fit as well. They've got some really good tools for product configuration and engineering and things of that nature. So Epicor can be a great fit as well. And by the way, with Epicor and in all these different systems we've talked about so far, whether it's Microsoft or SAP, Oracle, Epicor, you can find more not only through the ERP report, which you can scan this QR code right here. If you haven't already scanned that code, you can see the ERP report for this year. And this input I'm getting from you is to help us get some additional input for our 2025 report. But in the meantime, you can check out that QR code to learn about that. But the reason I bring this up is because you can not only scan that paper or that report to get more info about all these different vendors we're talking about, but if you go to my YouTube channel and just search whatever vendor it is you want to learn more about, whether it's Epicor or Workday, Microsoft, Oracle, SAP, there's tons of videos on my YouTube channel that talk about these different systems and pros and cons, all that good stuff. So be sure to check that out. If you're looking for more of a deep dive into any one of these systems, be sure to check out not only the ERP report with QR code here, but you can also go to the YouTube channel. So that's a little bit about Epicor. Love to hear any feedback from people that have used Epicor. In fact, we've already got one comment here from Ard on LinkedIn. Ard says Epicor is a real manufacturing SMB focused platform, complete and nice integration with MES to integrate with machine data. Their branding in my realm is not very strong. And actually, I think I would agree with you on that. You don't see, I guess when I think branding, I think, for example, Odoo, we were talking about Odoo. Odoo's very good at branding. I mean, their marketing, their everything from like their logo to their color scheme to, I can't go anywhere in the US nowadays without seeing Odoo billboards. I see them at airports. I see them on highways. I'll see billboards. I even took my kids to a professional basketball game a few months ago out of town. It was outside of Denver where I'm based. I forgot where we were, but we're in some other city. And on the court, a big Odoo banner or a big Odoo graphic, was popping up in the middle of the game. So, you look at someone like an Odoo or certainly SAP. SAP's always been really good at branding. Epicor is not there yet. I don't know if they need to be or ever will be, partly because they don't need to be advertising in airports or on billboards because they're very focused. They're going after manufacturing companies in the Midwest, Midwestern US, or rural parts of Europe, where, some parts of Asia where there's, heavy manufacturing, industrial types of companies. One comment here, this is another good question from Dan on YouTube. Dan says, do you feel that there's an easy upgrade path from Epicor Vantage, Epicor 8, 9, and 10, which are really old, and Epicor Kinetic? Have you seen Kinetic and enterprise level deals or just SMBs? Yes, I have seen Kinetic and enterprise level deals, not as many as in the SMB space, but we are seeing Kinetic more now than we would have seen any Epicor product, say 10 years ago at the enterprise level. But I think your other point, the first point or the question you bring up, which is, do you feel there's an easy upgrade path from one of the legacy Epicor products to Epicor Kinetic? it's a great point in that it is largely a re-implementation, that's a true statement for most of the products I'm talking about here today. When we talk about you talk about Microsoft D365, for example, moving from the old Microsoft Dynamics Great Plains or Navision or Xapta, moving from one of those systems to D365 is essentially a re-implementation. Same with going from SAP ECC to S4HANA. That is largely a re-implementation. Now, there are benefits of staying with that same vendor because it has the same look and feel, and there's some similarities and commonalities, and it's an easier learning curve, but it still is very much it's very much a re-implementation, and that's something that's worth noting as well. I want to get to at least one more vendor here to talk about, and that's Oracle NetSuite. And the reason I want to make sure we get to this one is because Oracle NetSuite is such a common system in the small and mid-market. They rank high in our top 10 list just largely because of their market share. I mean, so many small and mid-sized companies are using NetSuite, so much so that I think at times Oracle gets a little bit too far ahead of themselves trying to sell NetSuite in places they maybe shouldn't be selling NetSuite. So I think they're very aggressive in their sales efforts. They've obviously picked up a lot of market share in recent years. What I like about NetSuite, especially now, I wouldn't have necessarily thought this was a big deal 5 or 10 years ago, but especially now with all these other competitors like SAP and Oracle and Microsoft who are still sort of making that transition over to the cloud, they're not sitting back doing nothing, but they've been in the cloud since 1998 and when they started 25 years ago. So everything they've built, all the R&D dollars they put into their product is still relevant here today in 2024 as it was, back in the late 90s and early 2000s when they were starting out. The reason this is a big deal is because then on the flip side, or in contrast, you have, say, SAP or Microsoft, who has all these legacy products with great capabilities, but now they're trying to rewrite that code and recreate that capability for the cloud. And so that's just, that's a lot of, I don't want to say it's wasted R&D, but it's R&D that they have to make now that NetSuite doesn't have to redo. NetSuite can just keep building on their capabilities. They can keep expanding the product and growing and whatever. They're not having to redo stuff for the cloud because they were always in the cloud. So there's a certain amount of maturity and stability that comes with an established cloud solution like a NetSuite, and that's something that's worth noting. It's a great first real ERP system for a lot of small and mid-sized companies that are moving from QuickBooks or Xero or some sort of industry-specific ERP system or a homegrown system. Oracle NetSuite can be a great way to sort of ease into the world of commercial off-the-shelf cloud systems. So those are some things to keep in mind. The downside of Oracle NetSuite, I would say, well, let me finish or add one more strength. One of the strengths that is more recent or more of a recent development for Oracle NetSuite is they have really focused on this whole platform concept where they've opened up their platform to third-party developers and they've created different apps, and there's different app providers now that can provide different point solutions within the NetSuite platform. So that gives a lot of options for organizations too. If they find that Oracle NetSuite as a base product gets them close, but not all the way to where they need to be, they might find what they need to fill in some of those gaps with third-party apps on the platform. So that's something to keep in mind as well. The downside of Oracle NetSuite is, again, back to a strength also being a weakness. The maturity of their cloud solution, the fact that they're SaaS multi-tenant means that there's a certain amount of rigidity or lack of flexibility that comes with the product. And now, again, I just said that there's third-party apps, there's a platform that opens up options and gives you a certain amount of flexibility. So they are doing things to counter this challenge. But a lot of companies implementing Oracle NetSuite, especially small companies that aren't used to having a structured system, they struggle culturally and organizationally with that change at times and operationally. So it's just something to be aware of. It's not to say you shouldn't implement Oracle for that reason, but it's something that you just have to recognize as a risk. If you implement Oracle NetSuite in general, you're just going to have more rigidity and there's going to be more change imposed on your organization than you might have if you implemented, say, an Odoo or a Microsoft D365. So those are some of the things you've really got to keep an eye on. So love to hear your feedback on Oracle NetSuite. If you're using it or evaluating it, if you're part of the Oracle NetSuite community, I'd love to hear your feedback on what are the strengths and weaknesses of Oracle NetSuite. And while you're answering that question, I'll get to some additional audience questions here. This is from Fur again on YouTube. Fur says, I live in Mexico and Odoo hit product market fit in Latin America. A lot of clients of mine want it because of certain characteristics of the product, mainly price versus features included. And that's a great point. I will say, though, if I'm going to play devil's advocate with Odoo, you have to be careful in that, yes, they're really good at getting sort of a low cost point as an entry point, but they're also good at escalating the cost of their software over time. So it could be that it looks very enticing early on because it looks so cheap, especially with sort of that freemium model. But over time, if you really look at how they price their software, things can add up quickly over time. But now, on the other side of that, you also have to look at the simplicity. Their pricing model is a bit more simplistic than, say, like an Oracle NetSuite or Oracle Fusion. I'd say Oracle products in general have more complex pricing. It's harder to understand and decipher. And that could be even more risk for a lot of organizations than escalating costs that might be a little bit more transparent in the case of Odoo. All right. Thank you again to the audience for the great input and feedback and questions. Great stuff there. I always learn a lot from the audience, which is why I kind of like this format where we don't have a guest. We just ask the audience a bunch of questions and they become the guest. So thank you for being part of that here today. We've got a lot of stuff to debrief and to touch on from that conversation. We're also going to switch gears after that debrief. We're going to talk about how to go through business transformation without technology or without investing heavily in technology. So we're going to cover all that and more, but first we're going to take a quick break. We'll be back with more Transformation Ground Control. Hi, this is Eric Kimberling with Third Stage Consulting, and I want to invite you to join our annual tech agnostic conference called Digital Stratosphere. Digital Stratosphere is a conference that features some of the industry's brightest minds, greatest thinkers, and it's a great opportunity to network with peers, other industry people, other CIOs, other project team members that are going through digital transformations or ERP implementations. We've got a great lineup of speakers this year. It's a 3-day event, a lot of great entertainment, networking opportunities. I'll be there as one of the keynote speakers, along with some of my favorite speakers in the industry as well, both within Third Stage Consulting, but also outside the company as well. So I encourage you to check it out and learn more. You can go to stratosphere2024.com to learn more about the event. You can see the agenda, the way it's shaping up, and you can see some of the past testimonials of people that have attended. And the event is October 2nd through the 4th, 2024. It's going to be based in Denver, Colorado, downtown Denver, beautiful downtown Denver in the fall, which is a great time to visit Denver if you haven't been. Again, stratosphere2024.com. Check out the agenda. Check out our early bird pricing for passes. And the other beautiful things, if you can't be here in person in Denver, which we hope you can, but if you can't, you can also join remotely as well. We have virtual passes available as well, so you're able to join from wherever in the world you might want to join from. So stratosphere2024.com, check it out, and I hope to see you there.
The last thing you want to have happen is for your digital transformation to end up in court. I've been doing this for 20 years and I have seen everything. My name is Marcus Harris. I'm a software and technology attorney focusing my practice on drafting and negotiating software-related contracts and litigating software disputes across the country. Feel free to reach out to us at taflaw.com. We'd love to talk to you about the litigation process and what you can expect.
Hello, welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 182. My name is Eric Kimberling here with Darian Chwialkowski. You can find new episodes of this show every Wednesday by going to transformationgroundcontrol.com. And Darian, we just had this conversation here about some of the leading ERP systems in 2025, the systems you should be considering. We didn't get to a lot of them. There's a lot of systems I wanted to get to. We just ran out of time. But what were some of your thoughts and takeaways from the conversation we did have time to get to here today?
Yeah, I thought it was really interesting to hear how the softwares have changed over time. I know you talked about that with each software and how they are shaping up for 2025 here. I know like you said, there's a lot of softwares that you kind of left off the list, or we just ran out of time, really, that would have been on that list of top softwares. But one thing I'm really excited for, I know we probably won't do it in this podcast, but in the future, is to hear how you're actually going to, rank those are in a way for the top 10 for 2025 and how they fall under a ranking for that. But what I want to dive into, I guess, right now in this post segment is follow up on some of those softwares that maybe we ran out of time, or some of them that you maybe are going to leave off no matter what, even if we didn't run out of time, and why, and why you're going to leave them off of that list for 2025.
Right. Yeah. So is that the question?
I want to know. Yeah.
That's a good question. I don't know that there's any that I wouldn't consider. I think the biggest question I have and the biggest point of controversy, maybe this is a good question for the audience here too. But one of the biggest controversies I have when we create these lists is first of all, back to your question, how do we create the list? Well, there's a number of criteria we use. I mentioned some of them at the beginning of the segment, things around cost, functionality, risk, platform versus application, what kind of support is available in the ecosystem, what kind of implementation support's out there, all that stuff. Those are all things to consider. You also look at vendor viability, the overall roadmap, and there's a lot of stuff you can look at. And there's no, for some organizations, you have different priorities. Certain things are more important to you than others. So that right there is a difference in how you might rank a top 10 list for this subset of people over here versus this subset of people over here with different priorities. So right away, you can see how quickly this can evolve or devolve into a bunch of caveats or things that are open to interpretation or differing opinions. And that's why I like to do them, to be honest, because no matter what we put in the top 10 or how the rankings come out, it's going to stimulate a certain amount of conversation. People that agree, people that disagree, people that have more questions. So that's why I like doing it. It creates a conversation. But the reality is, if you give me specific criteria for you as an organization, it's going to be a lot easier for me to create a tailored top 10 list for you than to try and do it broadly across all industries. So that's the first thing I'll mention. The second thing, getting back to what I was first going to say, is that the biggest controversy we have, though, when we do these top 10 lists is what do you categorize as an ERP system versus not? For example, I would consider, and a lot of people do not agree with me on this, but I would consider Salesforce a CRM system, especially if you look, or I'm sorry, it is a CRM system. I would consider Salesforce not only as a CRM system, but also as an ERP system. And the reason for that is Salesforce was built as a CRM system, but they've also built this platform where it provides other ERP capabilities. So if I look at Salesforce with the Force platform that it's built on, to me, that is an ERP system. It's maybe not perfect. It may not be ideal for some organizations, but I would argue it is an ERP system. But many in the industry disagree with me and say it is not an ERP system. Same with Workday. Workday is very strong in financials and human capital management, but it's not as strong in inventory management or manufacturing and other features that many would expect from an ERP system. However, I would still consider that an ERP system. It has its weaknesses, it has its strengths, just like any other. It may not be as complete as other ERP systems out there in the marketplace, but I would still say it is ERP. So I don't know, to answer your question, I don't know that there's anything I wouldn't include. I think the tricky part, though, is saying, is a Salesforce or Workday a real ERP system that compares to an SAP or an Oracle or whatever? Same with like Palantir or Snowflake. Those are not really traditional ERP systems, but they provide ERP-like results or capabilities or functions. So does that count as ERP? And I would say yes, because to me, why rule something out just because it doesn't fit the label of what you want it to be? The labels are becoming more blurred over time. So why not consider it as an option? So that's a long way of saying I don't know what I'm going to throw out. I don't think there's anything we're going to necessarily throw out or refuse to consider as part of the top 10 list. In fact, if anything, we're trying to expand what we think about and what we consider as we look to those different solutions.
Yeah, that makes sense. So I'm interested, in the future then to figure out, after we have considered all of the different softwares, what that top 10 list is going to shape like for 2025.
Yes, stay tuned. We will have our 2025 digital transformation report released in the coming months, and by the end of the year, you'll see that in the fall of this year. And be sure to stay tuned for that, because you will see that coming out. You also see it come out on my YouTube channel when that top 10 list is available. But yeah, good stuff. So I'd love to hear the feedback from the audience here. Any systems that we absolutely should have covered in this episode that we didn't. I know there's a lot we didn't cover, but I'd love to hear your feedback. Which ones should we have talked about? And also love to hear your feedback on what do you think some of the best systems are that are out there in the market, especially if you've evaluated some of them in the past. Love to hear your feedback there. So drop those in the chat or the comments wherever you're listening or watching here, and we'll keep an eye on those. And you may, who knows, you may be part of our top 10 list. You may influence it in ways that you didn't realize. So be sure to drop your comments here in the chat. So we're going to shift gears and move away from technology. In fact, we're going to talk about, even though this is a digital transformation focused podcast, we are going to talk about what happens if you want to go through a business transformation, but you don't have the budget or the resources or the time or the risk tolerance to go through a big technology project or a big technology initiative. What if you want to improve your business, but you don't want to rip out your back office systems and put in a new ERP system? What are your options? Can you do it? That's all the stuff we're going to talk about here in just a moment in our last segment of today's episode. So be sure to stick around. We'll be right back with more Transformation Ground Control.
If you are involved in any sort of digital transformation or business change initiative, you'll want to download the Digital Transformation Report. With its comprehensive overview of business and technology trends and best practices, this report is a must-have guide for any transformation project or executive team. Download this free report by visiting Third Stage Consulting at thirdstage-consulting.com. You can also visit our website to learn more about us or download independent reports, videos, and other best practices. Again, visit thirdstage-consulting.com today to learn how you can take your transformation to the third stage of success.
Are you looking for ways to promote your product or service to enterprise technology decision makers and influencers throughout the world, like the ones who listen to this podcast? Major Tom Productions creates media, events, and influencer marketing for B2B technology providers. Our productions are exciting, educational, disruptive, and effective. Most importantly, they create results. Our content is unlike any other in this industry, engaging, influential, and trusted by technology buyers and influencers throughout the world. Each month, our productions reach hundreds of thousands of targeted buyers and decision makers who trust and engage with our honest and tech-agnostic content. With long-tail viral results and engagement with our content, Major Tom Productions provides a way to reach your target market and create awareness, calls to action, and a connection with potential customers. So, collaborate with us today. Learn how we can feature your product or service on podcasts such as Transformation Ground Control, Journey to S4HANA, and Journey to Dynamics 365. We can also feature your brand on our YouTube channel called Digital Transformation with Eric Kimberling, which boasts over 100,000 subscribers and over 2 million video views per year. You can also participate in our in-person events, including our Digital Stratosphere Conference. Contact us today to learn more. We can tailor a marketing campaign that works for you. We look forward to helping more people learn more about and become engaged with your brand.
Hello, welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 182. My name is Eric Kimberling here at Darian Chwialkowski. You can find new episodes of this show every Wednesday by going to transformationgroundcontrol.com, and you can also listen to or watch all the past episodes at that same website as well. Again, that's transformationgroundcontrol.com. Also, quick reminder, register for our Stratosphere 2024 conference, Digital Stratosphere in Denver, Colorado, October 2024. You can join in person in Denver, Colorado, or you can join virtually with a virtual pass. So be sure to check that out. Go to stratosphere2024.com to learn more about that. So want to play you this clip. Darian, you and I talked about this before. Want to play a clip from my YouTube channel. It's a video that I created that talks about how to go through a business transformation without necessarily investing heavily in technology. And how do you get more value out of what you've already got? And this is going to be especially relevant for organizations that are just not ready to go through transformation. Maybe you don't have the budget yet. Maybe you don't have the resources. Maybe your current systems are working perfectly fine and you just don't see a need to go spend millions of dollars on new technology. That's okay. What do you do? Well, that's what we want to talk about. These are the 4 or 5 things you can do to enable a business transformation and get a lot of value out of a business transformation, even without investing in a ton of new technology. So with that being said, let's roll this clip and we'll come back and talk about it. When we hear the term digital transformation, the word digital throws us off oftentimes. We think that to go through a transformation, we need to invest in a lot of big, shiny, expensive technologies. But the reality is there's a lot of incremental things that organizations can be doing to get more value out of existing technology they might have in place. Not to say that they might not be in parallel looking at other options and looking at potential technology investments in addition to that, but there's a lot of things that organizations can be doing more incrementally at lower cost, lower risk than a big, massive digital transformation. So what I want to do today is share some ideas and things to be thinking about as you define your digital strategy that are ways that you can go through your transformation and be super effective and add a lot of value to your organization without necessarily having to invest heavily in new technology. Most organizations we work with, even the ones that have tons of modern ERP systems or tons of new technologies in place, they have broken business processes. Processes that are suboptimal, that are inefficient, and highly ineffective. And despite the best technologies, oftentimes organizations will not fine-tune their business processes, and they won't be using technologies in the most optimal way, even though the technologies can help them improve their processes. So one of the things you can do as an organization to lead a transformation without necessarily having to go buy a bunch of new technology is to look at how you can be using the technology you have to optimize the processes you have. And it could be as simple as standardizing your operations and looking at ways that you can consolidate and make sure that you as an organization are acting as one company. For example, if you have multiple departments that are doing different business processes, but it's within the same function, like an accounting department or an HR department that is doing things differently throughout the organization, you might start to look at ways that you could create business processes that are more consistent and more standardized across the entire organization. And that simple activity of business process optimization can deliver a lot of business value at a much lower cost without having to invest the time, money, and risk associated with big, expensive digital transformations. So think of business process optimization as one of those areas of low-hanging fruit that you can get immediate business value no matter what your legacy systems are or what types of technologies you are or aren't using. Now, for more information on how to go about the process of business process optimization, I encourage you to check out this video right here. This is a video about business process management and how to go through the business process of improving your overall business processes. If you check out this video right here, it gives you all you need to know about business process optimization. Just like broken business processes can undermine the efficiency of an organization, so too can inefficient organizational structures. If you think about the way you're organized as a company, you probably have roles and responsibilities that are redundant. You might have unclear roles and responsibilities. There might be better ways that you could organize your team and structure your organization to be more effective and more productive in the work that it does. And again, this is something you can do independent of technology. You can do it with the technologies you have in place today. You can change people's roles, you can change their responsibilities, you can change the way the organization is structured to create immediate business value without a big, massive investment in technology. I'll give you a quick example. Oftentimes when we're working with multinational corporations, organizations that have locations spread throughout the world, and perhaps these multinational corporations have invested in mergers and acquisitions. They've gone out and acquired other organizations, and they've opened up new offices in other countries. They start to act like a bunch of different companies, and people start to do their roles and their jobs in different ways. And you end up with a lot of redundancy and things that are repetitive throughout the organization. And if those same organizations were to take the time to rethink how they're doing work and how they're organized, they might find that more of a shared services model of moving to more of a consolidated, standardized way of operating and being structured might be one way to drive efficiency and effectiveness throughout the organization. Again, without necessarily having to invest a bunch of money in new technology. So think of organizational design as one of the ways that you can pull on that lever of getting more business value and optimizing your effectiveness as an organization without necessarily needing to invest heavily in a bunch of expensive new technology. Technology and data silos are one of the biggest problems that organizations face operationally and technically. In other words, they have multiple systems that aren't talking to one another, and they have data silos that are spread out through multiple systems. And that creates a certain amount of inefficiency and ineffectiveness and lack of visibility into operational data that's required to make the company successful. Now, one solution would be that you could replace all those legacy systems with a new integrated set of products. Or another option might be you find a way to integrate those systems better to where you're not necessarily ripping out those old systems and replacing them, but now you're integrating them across the entire organization. So there's a lot of different ways you could do this. You can do this with integration tools that are out there. There's certainly platforms and integration middleware types of tools that'll help you. There's also interoperability types of solutions that allow you to tie together and integrate multiple sets of data. Products from companies like Snowflake and Palantir, for example, are good examples of products that can be put in place to make more use of your legacy systems and allow you to integrate your workflows, integrate your systems, and integrate your data across the existing systems you have. And again, this might be a small incremental investment in technology, but but it's not a massive investment in all new back office systems. So that's another way to think about this, is how can we look at integration and operability as one possible way of getting better integration and access to different systems and data that we might already have in place within our organization. Artificial intelligence tools is another way that you can get more immediate value out of your current systems and your current environment without necessarily having to invest heavily in technology. Now, it does require an investment in AI tools and AI technologies, but the good news is there's so much open artificial intelligence tools and so many options out there that are relatively low cost that would allow you to do things like create chatbots and to create user interfaces that allow you to interact differently with the systems you have. And especially with the generative AI tools that are out there, there's a lot of ways you could use ChatGPT and OpenAI and other types of tools to help accelerate people's effectiveness and efficiency and productivity without, again, necessarily needing to replace all of your back office systems. And if you think about the beauty of artificial intelligence, is that it can make use of the data it has. And if you've got good data in your legacy systems, even if the systems themselves are outdated and they're hard to navigate and they're not in a cloud environment and there's a bunch of other faults with those systems, even if that's the case, you could be using AI as a way to get that low-hanging fruit of value, and getting the value of AI and the value of data analysis and the value of easier navigation and the benefits of generative AI, all those different things that can make you more effective and productive as an organization can be done without necessarily having to rip out and replace all these expensive systems that you've spent years building. Instead, you can put in AI tools that allow you to more incrementally start to get some immediate business value using different types of use cases throughout your organization and using the systems and data that you already have in place. So the beauty of artificial intelligence, in addition to the fact that it's a game-changing technology, is that it can be a low-cost and more incremental way to get business value without having to go through a big, massive, long-term, expensive, risky digital transformation. So I hope this has provided you some guidance on how to get more business value out of technology you might have in place and help you to identify ways to transform your business and go through a transformation without necessarily having to invest a ton of money in new technology. And again, this is meant to be a solution that provides you incremental improvements, maybe in parallel with a broader or bigger digital transformation. Or if you're not sure when or if you're going to go through a digital transformation, it can be a way to help you make progress, make improvements, and cherry pick some technology improvements and usage that allow you to do so in a way of the confines of the current budget and the current risk profile that you might have as an organization. So if you'd like to learn more about other digital strategies that are meant to help you through your digital transformation, I encourage you to read our Digital Transformation Report. It's an annual report we publish each year that highlights some of the trends and best practices in the digital transformation space. It also provides a number of benchmarks and independent reviews and rankings of different technologies available to you in the marketplace. If you'd like to read that, you can scan the QR code right in front of you or go to the links in the description field below. So that's a clip from my YouTube channel, Darian, where we talk about how to go through business transformation without technology. What were some of your thoughts and takeaways from that clip?
Yeah, I think it's a really good resource for companies that maybe don't have the budget to go through this big digital transformation and heavily invest, millions or hundreds of thousands of dollars in a digital transformation. So I thought that was really good. But I do have some follow-up questions to expand on the topic. The first one being, what are the most common areas? I know you talked about low-hanging fruit in the video, but so what are the most common areas companies can find that low-hanging fruit for improvements?
I'd say there's two of them. One is just retraining. I mean, people that just don't really understand how to use the technology you have. And so, in other words, you've got some feature or capability you've rolled out, you've deployed it, but the people aren't using it because they don't understand it. Maybe they don't like it, whatever. There's a reason they're not using it. So let's figure out what we need to do. Do we need to retrain? Oftentimes it's just retraining, honestly. I mean, when we've done this for clients, it's amazing how sometimes simple the solution is to just go train people on how to do what you already have, and you're going to get a ton of value out of it, and so you don't have to put in a new system. You already have it. So go use it and help your people figure out how to use it. So that's one. And then the other I'd say is just sort of fine tuning the tie between your business processes and how the technology was deployed. And a lot of times there's a mismatch on one side or the other or both, where maybe the process, you didn't change it to fit the software, or you didn't configure the software to fit the business, or maybe it's some combination of both. And a lot of times those are real easy fixes. It's just like, you're sort of like you're running parallel paths, but you haven't brought them together. And so you've got to either move the software over to the process or move the process over to the software. And it's amazing what a big impact that can have. And in all this we're talking about in both cases, and even other examples of low hanging fruit and things that you can get from your current technology, it all starts with the root cause analysis and really just understanding why are we not getting the value we want, or what's preventing us from getting even more value out of what we already have. And usually you're going to come up with answers like, well, we could train people more. We could tweak our business processes. We could reconfigure the software maybe to fit our processes a little better. Maybe there's some modules that we haven't invested in that could be real small investments of new technology or new capabilities based on the software we already have. So there's a lot of little things like that you start to uncover, and really what you're looking for are the things that are low cost, high value, and you prioritize that way, and you work your way down the list until eventually you start getting to stuff that maybe it's a little bit higher cost, a little bit lower value, and then you start to question whether or not you do everything. But if you start with that low hanging fruit, low cost, high value stuff, you're going to find a lot of stuff in I'd say in most cases.
For sure, that makes sense. For the organization, there's definitely signs sometimes that their structure is really hindering their efficiency and effectiveness to use maybe the technology that they already have in place. How can organizations really identify what those are that are hindering their efficiency and effectiveness?
Well, one automated way to do it is to do process mining. So we have process mining tools we use in our consulting engagements where the technology essentially crawls your current systems and your databases to see what the processes are, what the lead times or the cycle times are in different processes, and it visualizes and quantifies it for you. So you can look at data and say, oh, we thought things were working this way, but this is actually how they're working in the system. This is actually how long it's taking. And you start to identify bottlenecks, and you visually will see bottlenecks. Like here's a spot in the process that for some reason is getting stuck. The data is not flowing past this point, or it's slowing way down. There's something wrong at that point in the process. And the process mining tool will give you data and visualization to see where some of that is. Even aside from data, quantitative data, just having qualitative conversations and walking through an end-to-end process to see, now that we've got technology in place, how are we using the software, and what is, where the breakdown's happening, what are the things that we could streamline. Those qualitative conversations can be pretty powerful as well. So I'd say it's a combination of both qualitative analysis and understanding of what's happening, but also using process mining tools and data to understand what's actually happening behind the scenes.
For sure. And one last question I have is, how can organizations effectively allocate resources between maintaining existing systems they have and exploring new technologies?
Yeah, good question, because I don't know if this is what you're alluding to or where you're going with it, but the more you invest in your current technologies, the harder it is to move away from it someday. So if you're going to move away from it, say in a year or 2 or 3 or whatever, by investing more in it now, it just makes it, a little bit harder to move away should you need to in the future. So you do have to walk a balancing act, but at the same time, you don't want to just sit still and be complacent and say, well, we're going to switch systems eventually, so why even bother fixing this one? If anything, you want to condition yourselves to get used to change and constantly improve, and always be looking at how can we improve things. And the more you optimize and get value out of what you have today, the more likely it is you're going to have a solid blueprint and a solid understanding of what it is you want tomorrow with potential new technology when that time comes. So in some ways, you're sort of conditioning yourselves, preparing for a race that you're going to have in the future, but it may just be that you're not going to have it now. So does that answer your question? Now I don't remember the second time in this episode. I forgot your question. So
No, yeah, I think it does. I think that answers the question today.
good deal.
Mm-hmm.
Good, because that's the only answer I've got. So thank you for that. Thanks for bailing me out there. And thanks for the great conversation here today. Great topics we covered here, and thank you to the audience for the great participation as well. Really appreciate your feedback, and love to hear any other feedback you have throughout this episode as well. So be sure to drop those in the chat. You can find new episodes of the show every Wednesday. Go to transformationgroundcontrol.com. Go watch any episodes that might interest you that you may have missed. All that can be found at transformationgroundcontrol.com. And then again, our upcoming digital stratosphere event in Denver, Colorado, October 2nd, 3rd, and 4th. Be sure to check it out and register at stratosphere2024.com. You can join Darian and I in person in Denver, or you can join Darian and I and other speakers remotely with a virtual pass as well. So wherever in the world you are from, we invite you to be there in person or remotely. So Be sure to check that out at stratosphere2024.com. Look forward to next week's episode. We'll have another great episode planned for you in episode 183. We're going to talk about how to be deliberate about the timing of your digital transformations and the pace of your digital transformations, and how sometimes it's better to slow down, in some cases even stop your transformation, to make sure you have a clear plan and you're all headed in the same direction. So we're going to talk about that next week with Judith O'Callaghan. She's going to be our guest in episode 183, so be sure to stick around for that. But in the meantime, check out any of the past episodes of TransformationGroundControl.com. Hope you have a great week in the meantime. We'll see you next week on the Transformation Ground Control podcast. Take care.